Neighbor sued me after harassing my dog for months, lost horribly. Posted by DeadDrone999. About 6 or 7 months ago, my neighbor got a drone. I don't mind people having hobbies, but for some reason, he insisted on flying like the biggest jerk possible. He would hover in front of other houses and windows, try to race cars going down the road, and worst of all, he had a habit of flying his drone in my fenced backyard, buzzing over my dog, diving low just over my dog's head before circling around to do it again. My dog isn't small, he's about 70 pounds in the Malamute, but the drone terrified him and I was worried what would happen if it hit him. I asked my neighbor several times to please not fly in my yard and explained that it was scaring my dog. He basically told me to get lost and laughed in my face. When it still continued, I called the police. Unfortunately, there wasn't much they could do other than ask him to please not fly over my house and property. Finally, in late December, it happened. My dog got tired of his crap and managed to catch the drone right as it was diving towards him. He shredded the drone. The thing was just a jumbled mess of wires and plastic. Neighbor was ticked. He stormed over to my house, swearing and threatening me, which I ignored. A week later, I got summons to small claims court. He wanted $900 for the cost of his drone and an additional $300 for supposedly denying him access to his property. The drone sat in my yard for a couple of hours before it was retrieved. Forget that. He could have killed my dog. I don't have kids or a girlfriend. I just have my dog, who's my best friend for the past 7 years. That dog has moved with me 3 times, was there when I graduated college, saw me buy my first house and my first new car. I love my dog. I went to legal advice, got some great help from them. Turns out, him suing me was the best thing to ever happen. When we got to small claims court, the judge basically laughed away his claims that I had intentionally trained my dog to attack his drone. But little did he know, I was prepared. I had dozens of photos of my yard showing that it was impossible for him to accidentally fly that low to my dog, videos of him harassing my dog in the past, and I had saved all my medical bills from taking my dog to the vet. $700 for an x-ray? Check. Another $250 to sedate him during? Why not? Don't want him being uncomfortable. And a full dental exam with a tooth cleaning and repair? $400. Then there was the cost of the anti-anxiety meds and the secondary checkup, wet food for a week in case his teeth were hurt, and extra just for good measure. In the end, the a-hole ended up owing me almost $2,000 and now is being investigated by the FAA for not having a registered drone and violating several FAA regulations concerning drone flight, too near an airport, too close to other people, out of sight of operator, and way above the maximum altitude. Enjoy never being able to fly drones again, jerk. Want me to unload my own trailer? Okay, I needed a vacation anyway. Posted by Arrow the Observer. So I was a trucker for a while, and that comes with plenty of stories of crazy things in so many places. One of my favorite stories, however, comes from a piece of malicious compliance that came together just perfectly. The setup. I tend to be a bit on the lazy side when I can get away with it, and I searched for quite some time to find a company that would keep me far away from unloading the trailers myself. I found a good one that had a 95% drop and hook rate, which is where you drop off a trailer full of goods and then grab a new one that's either loaded or to take to the next pickup. 4.9% of them are either handled by the receiving dock or by lumpers, which are dock workers hired by the warehouse companies specifically to unload trucks. That 0.1% is a list of places that just want to watch you work or be convinced that you really shouldn't operate their lifts. In my contract, I saw that there was a place where your hourly rate for unloading was stated, not for the hours that you were sitting and waiting to be unloaded, but for when you were the one unloading your own trailer. So I also saw that the contract allowed for alterations to be made to the price of this service to be charged to the customer. As a joke, I put in not 1, but 2 extra zeros. $1,500 an hour for unloading a trailer? That should deter most people. Most people saw that, got a good laugh, and then pulled in someone to unload for me. The event. Most people, like I said, were smart. This run was set to arrive at 3 o'clock to a certain clothing store in the mall. Let's call him IB Nickeled. I'd been to the store a few times before, and it was always the same manager, Mr. Dime, receiving me, and it was always the same runaround. If I wanted to get unloaded, I had to wait for someone to get there, and then I'd have to sit and wait while the poor kid back there got the load off, and then I'd have to wait for traffic to ease up to get out, since it was always almost 10:30 by the time I finally left, leaving me with only a couple of hours left on my clock to get to a truck stop for the day. I got there and yep, Mr. Dime had come in to accept the load. It was always hard to be smart at 3 o'clock, and I can only imagine that was part of Mr. Dime's usual runaround. This time was a bit different for a few reasons. One, he smelled like there was a bit of an herbal calming remedy about him to settle his nerves for the night. Two, he said that he was completely understaffed and there was no one around to unload me, so I'd have to do it myself. 3, I couldn't stay to my usual time because he had to leave before 5 o'clock. To be fair to him, I did try and say, sure, but my contract says, I don't give a dang what your contract states. I don't have anyone in until the store opens, and I've got an appointment that's more important than some trucker's contract. Just unload it yourself. I considered it for a moment and went back up to my truck to get my tablet. This was in 2019, before the virus, and the company had just swapped over to tablets for certain things, like signing off on expenses or getting permissions. Mr. Dime was fuming when I came back and handed him the tablet. Yeah, just read through and sign with your finger. He didn't read through. I had 20 pallets at 1,500 pounds each. The only available tool to unload was a manual pallet jack. I started my work clock and began unloading at 3:15. At 5 o'clock, Mr. Dime looks on in satisfaction to see me about 3/4 of the way through as he's out the door. At 5:15, Mr. Dime's replacement, Mr. Quarter, of the day shift, comes running in with his face white as a sheet to see me taking off the 4th to last pallet. Please tell me that I'm reading this wrong, he pled fruitlessly. I wish I could, I lied, knowing that Mr. Dime was about to be up a muddy creek with a spoon. I even tried telling Mr. Dime what he was getting into, but he just skimmed and signed. He slumped. Wait here, I need to call my district manager. Better be quick. I want to be out of this lot by 6:30 to beat the morning rush and get a good breakfast. He ran back, and I continued unloading. When I finally got the last pallet off at 5:50, I turned off my time clock as the district manager came in. We'll call him Mr. Dollar just to keep consistent, followed by Mr. Quarter, who was looking somewhat relieved, and by Mr. Dime, who was somewhere between terrified and furious. "You're Mr. Arrow?" Mr. Dollar asked, holding a printout and looking to it for the name. "That's me," I agreed. "I take it they sent over the contract Mr. Dime signed?" "Yes, and that's just it. Mr. Dime is accusing you of forging his signature on this, since there's no way he'd sign off on a multi-$1,000 contract just to unload a trailer, especially since he claims you insisted on unloading it yourself." I whistled. "Whew, that's a heck of an accusation. Hey, is that the CCTV I see up in the corner over there?" I asked, knowing full well that the entire loading dock was covered by a slew of cameras. The one I pointed out was positioned just right to catch the whole conversation at the door. "Mr. Quarter, get the footage," Mr. Dollar said. "We don't have audio, but we do have visual on them." Mr. Dime lost his fury and now just looked petrified. The fallout. One review later, and I was grinning like a loon back to my truck. I called my manager, booked some home time, and walked away with enough money to last to the end of the month. The next time I went into that IB nickeled, there was a new, much more sensible manager who always had a man on staff to unload the trucks. A quarter tank, also posted by Arrow the Observer. So, a while ago, I posted a story about IB nickeled and their nonsense. So, let's go back a bit further now to another story from my first trucking job, in my first 6 months as a trucker. The company I worked for was infamous because every new guy lasted about 90 days. This story is about that company and what got one of my managers fired, all because of a simple request to be fueled on a short haul load. This load was dog food coming over from Sparks, Nevada and dropping at a distribution hub in Sacramento, California. My last load had been dropped a couple days before and I'd been sitting there waiting because I'd requested some home time. I lived in San Bernardino County, California at the time, so yeah, already in a bad mood from that since it killed my vacation days I'd saved up from that time. Lots of stories from this company, but I'll move on since this story is about me getting payback on that guy. So, I've been sitting for a couple of days. It's late August, I've been hot, and I've been running my rig for AC at night. I finally get my dog food load and notice that it doesn't have a fuel stop. The pickup is in 30, so I shoot a message over the Qualcomm unit to ask for a fuel stop. Due to this being a short-haul load under 200 miles, you will not be assigned fuel for this load. Cool. My gauge is on a quarter tank, but I'm sure they know that, right? I shoot them that info just to be sure and get no response while I'm picking up my load and getting ready to leave. Finally, I call my manager. Note that it's been around 10 years since then, so apologies for not having the conversation perfectly memorized. Oh, hey boss, you know I'm heading into Cali, right? I asked. I just need a fuel solution. You're good, dude. Just get this load done and we can get you fuel. He was, annoyingly as ever, ignoring my concerns. That's just it. I'm in Nevada at the moment, and as soon as I get to California, the price will jump. I tried explaining. It's only $2.50 over here, but my uncle said it was nearly $5 in Sacramento right now. You just get rolling. I'll figure something out if it's really bad. Well, I tried, and I was feeling particularly mad after the fiasco with my home days. So I set off, doing some mental math. I was loaded pretty heavy and going over one of the more annoying passes in the US. If you've done Donner, you know. I get up to the top of the pass just fine, still a bit over 1/8 tank left. 200 gallons worth of tank, so about 20 gallons, and an expected 9 miles to the gallon on the downhill with Jake's at full. Let's do this. Sure enough, I roll down the mountain with just enough gas to get me to my drop on Sacramento's harbor, then have down to the yard just enough gas to get to the 49er truck stop, the only spot my company had for fuel at the time in the area. My engine cuts in and out as I pull into the island. My manager is on for another 5 minutes or so I give him a call. Hey, I just got to the truck stop and my rig is running on fumes. Can I get some fuel? He was rushed and annoyed since he wanted to get home, just like I wanted to at this point. I still didn't expect what I got. Yeah, just fill up. You're authorized for 220 gallons, so you can get 3 for 2 if you have a trailer. And with that, he hung up. For those who don't know, August 2012 saw prices through most of California going back up to just over $4 a gallon. The 49er, who had somewhat of a monopoly because they were absolutely massive and the only major brand out there from what I knew at the time, were charging $6.50 or so per gallon. I'd just been given carte blanche for a full tank. I still remember the gallons and the price readout. 203.89 gallons at $1,309.55. Yep, $1,300 on a fill-up that normally costs about $400 on the extreme high end in the rest of the country. I went to bed knowing there would be a storm of epic proportions the next day. I was 21, annoyed, and fully willing to roll with whatever was coming because I was spiteful. Sure enough, I got a call from the night manager before the sun even came up. Arrow, what the frick is this fuel bill? Pull the Qualcomm messages in the call log from last night, I replied before hanging up and falling back asleep. When the sun was up, I had a message on my Qualcomm from my manager's manager, along with a new route directly to my home terminal. My manager had been fired, and they wanted to see me in person to figure out just what was going on. I got there, and after a couple of meetings, they gave me a week off and transferred me to relief and recovery. I have some horror stories from that, but those are for another time. For that day, I had just won against the single most annoying boss I'd ever known and had finally gotten myself a bit of time with my parents and brother, which was good enough for me. Hey, you're just doing your job, you need the gas to do that job, he tells you what to get when you get it, you try to help, he doesn't listen, you're doing it malicious compliantly. One by one, posted by the portable door. I was recently reminded of this story from a colleague. I work in contracts, meaning my department audits sign documents to make sure everything is legal and compliant with our policies. We have a very old system that we use. Think like early DOS, like a black screen with white words and you type everything manually. It looks like Pong. So typically what happens is I would get a contract for specific mechanical equipment and I would review to make sure it's possible in a physical sense and that the finances also make sense. Occasionally, we'll encounter a situation where we need to update our system to allow a contract to go through. This would be if we sold an older equipment that we no longer build but had a few spares lying around. Or if a client bought our equipment from a third-party provider but wants us to service it since we're the official company that makes this stuff. It's kind of like a car dealership selling a used car that they don't make anymore. It's still part of their brand, but they might not necessarily have software to support it since it's so outdated. Trying to explain the best I can. When we have these types of contracts with older equipment, all we have to do is send a note to a person in a specific department and ask her to open the system temporarily to allow these devices to be added and serviced. The way we send this request is that we fill out a form and submit it to this lady. This lady is something. Anyway, she's a combination of a power-hungry overlord and a scared, pathetic mouse. It's very interesting to see. I sometimes play a game to bet on which mode she will respond with. She's very much a bully who cries when she gets called out for being a bully and then says she's being bullied. Yeah, she's fun. So anyways, one day I received 85 new contracts, same client, all for used equipment that we don't make anymore and have not for years. Someone found a whole bunch of them for dirt cheap and bought them and now want us to service them. Cool, good find, Mr. Client. We'll be happy to help. Typically, you submit one request form per device. Filling out the form is a bit of a pain because it's a very manual process and a bit time-consuming. I like to be efficient and make life easier, so I did some reviewing and noticed that there are really only like 5 models of machines, 85 different serial numbers, but only 5 types. So I sent off a quick email saying the following. Hi lady, not her name, but I'm calling her that here. Hey, I have a whole bunch of machines to add to the system, but I don't want to submit 85 different tickets to you. I checked and saw there's only 5 model types. Can I send you the request in batches by model? Might make our lives a bit easier than going one by one. Now, this lady is notorious for sticking to the rules. I don't usually mind because rules exist for a reason. However, they were also created by people and therefore can be changed by people. In this instance, I was hoping lady would understand that I'm trying to save us both some time. Nope. Her response was, "It is unacceptable that you think you have the right to change the way we do things, especially that you don't even work in my department and have no concept of what it is that I do. We do not work however we want. We have procedures to follow, and if you are unfamiliar with these procedures, then it is clear to me that you need training. A new level of which has been achieved. You want me to follow procedures? You don't want to understand that I'm trying to help us both? Let's go then." I spent the next 3 hours creating my emails and ticket requests, but I didn't submit them as I went. Oh no, I waited until I had 85 of them ready to go. Once they were loaded, I spent a hilarious moment clicking send. It was like I was launching little torpedoes every time I clicked send, each causing small devastation as they build up in her inbox and overshadow anything else that might have been in her queue. Also, I know she keeps the volume on, so I know she was hearing that dang ding that has traumatized Outlook users everywhere. One by one, 85 different requests were running to her inbox like moths to a flame. I waited for the inevitable tantrum. "Hey, I see you're sending me a bunch of requests. Can you just bunch them together? This is a lot and it's messing up my system now due to the constant influx of emails and tickets." Did I forget to mention that our laptops are also super old? That many emails in one shot most definitely froze her Outlook for some time. I replied, "Oh, sorry that you're having a hard time. I was just following procedure as per your request. I already sent them all, so nothing I can do." "Well, how many requests did you send?" 85. "What?" I then put my status to out to lunch. Have fun, lady. I'm getting a sandwich. School expelled me for mom's anger. We sued the county and caused a reform. Posted by W. Fogel 97. So I have a really bad leg. I've had 13 surgeries, long story, and it just started at a new school. After the first 3 weeks, I had to go in for another procedure on my leg. Not that big deal to me, I've been here before. Upon my return, I had documentation of my restrictions as well as special amenities that were required. The big 3 were that I needed extra time to get from class to class, must have someone escort me, and needed unrestricted access to the elevator. All of these got me recurring problems such as constant harassment by my teachers and security about my being in the halls during class time, and why my cousin was out too, and he was filling the role of the escort as I have anxiety problems and we had the same classes. These first 2 were annoying but easy enough to deal with. The real issue was the elevator, as I was told multiple times that for security issues, I couldn't have a personal key due to it sharing the same functionality with the interior door keys. I would have never had any issues with this, as I was told there would always be someone on the same floor as my classes to open the elevator for me. This, of course, was untrue about 75% of the time. The lack of elevator access meant that I was always stuck in the halls when other students were going class to class and was consistently late due to having to wait for someone to come by and open the door for the elevator. This also meant that I would sometimes be stuck waiting through the entire lunch period, and due to my absences, couldn't afford to simply go to lunch after the fact. After about 3 weeks of this, I was tired of not getting to eat lunch, so I did one of the stupidest things I could have attempted and tried to use the stairs. For context, I was not on crutches, I was on a full-blown walker. About halfway down to the landing, I fell hard. As lunch was letting out, one of my friends found me, got someone to help pick me up, and carried me to the office. Another of my friends went to find my other cousin. The one who normally escorted me wasn't there due to being sick, so I was without escort because I couldn't bear the thought of a stranger escorting me, who, when getting to the office, managed to get me to calm down enough to give them my mother's number. Now, my mother is quite hot-tempered, but can keep a level head normally. When she heard I fell, she was there in record time. When she got there, she immediately asked what happened. I told her I didn't want to miss lunch again, so I tried to use the stairs. Big mistake, as that set off a SAR bomba-sized explosive. She immediately turned around and demanded for the principal and the VP to get their butts here ASAP. As soon as the principal and VP walked in, she started berating them in a fashion not suitable for most adults to hear, let alone kids. When the VP made an offhand remark about my condition, my mother was swarmed by local sheriffs that provided security for the school's entrances and office as she physically went after the VP. We were escorted out, and after looking at the file and realizing my cousin and I had the same address, they figured out that I didn't actually live there. Now, my grandmother's address was listed as she looked after me after I left school up until around 8 p.m. She was also raising my cousin after an issue between her and my aunt. They used this as grounds to expel me and told her I can be some other school's problem now. I was then enrolled at the school near my house and had to have yet another surgery to repair the damage that was done as a result of my fall and redo the work of the previous procedure. I had gotten multiple statements from my teachers as well as my doctors, and my parents were moving forward with a lawsuit naming the VP, principal, and the county school board. We were contacted by a lawyer who had won multiple cases against our school board, some of which went to the state Supreme Court, and he told us that he would take our case pro bono. He was getting tired of going up against the board and thought a case like this would be what it took to try and fix their crap. Fast forward 9 months, and I was walking out of court with a settlement to cover all my procedures, as well as a written confirmation that the school would be going through a complete administrative overhaul, and that the principal and VP would be let go and have their administrative credentials revoked in our state. My new school was let known day one of my medical requirements and my need for a personal elevator key by the superintendent and the head of the State Board of Education. Long story short, my school majorly messed up with the handling of my medical requirements, resulting in a lawsuit that cost the head administrators their jobs, as well as a full-blown, county-wide investigation of disability procedures. As the great Ron Burgundy says, well, that escalated quickly. The justice and fallout in this story is insane. This story's called My Boss Thought She Could Insult Everyone, so I made her pay everyone for going on vacations. Posted by Miss Plantasia. Last year, I took a summer job for a kids camp. It seemed to be quite well paid, and I wanted to try to see how working with kids goes. The hiring process was a little odd, as for the interview, I was just called unexpectedly, and that woman, which was later my boss, spoke on the phone for about 2.5 hours or more and asked some really weird personal questions. For example, she asked, "You aren't a COVIDiot, are you?" Remember that, it will be a factor in the story. Anyway, I needed the money and it was the only callback I'd gotten so far, so I took it. She then made us all come in 2 times before starting the job so that she can explain it to us. Both times it went on the whole frickin' day without being included in our payments because it was not mandatory. I got to be the boss of my team. Then the first day came around and we faced 20 or more children with their parents. But the boxes with the name list, the toys and everything weren't there. We basically improvised and wrote their names as they came and hoped that they are indeed signed up. Later, the boxes arrived, but the contents were measly at best. She had given us 2 kinds of games, Uno and something else, bought it like 3 times. We got little instruments for the kids to decorate, but when she came around to check on us a few days later, she screamed at us. The freaking kids shouldn't have been allowed to take the instruments home, which she never said and made no sense. The next few days went on like this. She came around and screamed at us for doing something that made sense to every one of us and pretending that she had instructed us otherwise at the unpaid, non-mandatory orientation meeting, which I attended every time. She just talked about her personal life, no instructions. She went on and offended every single person in existence. She doesn't want to have lactose intolerant or handicapped kids in the camp because they're too much of a hassle. My Muslim colleague got scolded for wanting to go home to her toddler after a 10-hour shift, and she asked her in front of everyone if her son still breastfeeds in a crude way, because she doesn't have any reason to go home. Parents with questions or complaints are to be educated like kids because they behave like that when they didn't get screwed by their wife the night before. Also, she made us work more than 12 hours without a break and crapped on me when I stood up and went home at 12 hours worked. We have a law that requires that here. But 2 events stood out when she went after the kids. On the first occasion, you have to remember that this woman has an unhealthy obsession with Corona. She not only changed the rules of everything anytime it fit her narrative. With us, she also did that with the parents, which led to misunderstandings every single day. So she asked the children, aged 4 to 10, which one had done an antigen test and who had a PCR test. Of course, the children didn't all know what this is, and a little 5-year-old girl raised her hand for the false one. When my boss noticed that, she gave this poor girl the scolding of her life and told her that she is dumb as a rock for not knowing the difference. Pretty sure this girl had spit in her face. I was so in shock, I probably should have slapped her for that, but I didn't. The girl tried hard to not cry and didn't come back the days after. The second incident was even more disturbing. A 4-year-old boy hit his head at the playground when they were all outside. I was back in the office when my colleagues came running. I called the boss while my colleague called the ambulance. When I told her that and how my colleague was already on the phone with the ambulance, she scolded me. But not because that boy got hurt, no, because we called the ambulance. In her world, it wasn't that bad, and the father shouldn't find out, as if he was blind and wouldn't have seen the open wound anyway. The ambulance came and told us it was completely fine, even mandatory to call them in this case as an institution, and the boy suffered no further injury. He is fine now, thankfully. But I was furious. I was completely freaking out of anger. I'd only worked there for 9 days, and the kids as well as us had been abused enough. Instead of going after my impulse to call her back and tell her off, I calmed myself, and the next day, I didn't go to work, but to the doctor. I explained to her that my boss abuses me, but I can't terminate the contract early, so to keep me from snapping, she put me on a sick leave without end date. My boss was not amused when I sent her that doctor's notice, but I ignored her calls. I then proceeded to talk with my teammates and encouraged them to get sick leave and told them exactly what they can do and say to get that. They even tried to get rid of my Muslim coworker illegally. I explained to her that the paperwork from them is not legal and she should ignore it and also go on sick leave. So, in about a 2-week frame, my location had to replace all 6 people, including me, the boss there. And I took all the records home too, so she couldn't just pass them on, and also changed the password to my email account and did everything to tick her off. The story doesn't end here. As I found out, the word spread like wildfire, and because she was such a piece of crap to everyone at every location, 1 month after the start, she lost more than half of her staff. Some of them still had to be paid sick leave. Apparently, she called some of them and begged them to come back and offered bonuses as high as double the pay and still got nobody to come back to help. The silver lining was that the parents also had enough and many kids were taken out of that camp. So the end of July was here. I was on sick leave and she calls. She proceeds to tell me, suspiciously calm, that if I don't want to come back next month, I should tell her now, please, and she offered to end my contract without further obligations and with my payment for the whole month of July. I tell her about how I'm coming back because I really want to get better and other bullcrap. And of course, I just didn't, and I proceeded to collect one additional full month of sick leave without ever even speaking to her directly again. I also went out of my way to continue offering information for every single staff member of all locations that wanted to leave and still get paid or wanted to know where they can report her. So in the end, this is what she got for being a disrespectful witch. She lost half or more of her workers. Everyone hates her and wants nothing to do with her, really bad publicity included. She had to pay me the full 2 months, my vacation time out in money, which is quite expensive for them, as I didn't take it because I was so sick, pay my overtime and the mandatory bonus you get for doing extra hours. All of this multiplied by 6 at least. I got around $6,000 for 9 days of work from them. Her entire enterprise went downhill. And of course, I also had to get my money through legal support, so that came on to her too. I can't explain how much detail I put in the legal planning, so to get all the people paid out as much as possible without any chance of legal repercussions ever. My butt is safer than safe. She will not ever be able to retaliate on what I did there. I studied law for a while and got everything double-checked by professionals. She tried to harass me, and I blocked her. But I heard she read my personal information to the other colleagues who stayed there and called me all possible names. So, if she should ever even try to sue me or blackmail me, I have evidence and witnesses for trying to dox me, insulting me, and various other things. Honestly, after I wrote that down now, I'm kinda proud, but also surprised at how nicely all of that worked out. I didn't see any listings searching for that project this year, so hopefully that went downhill, and I hope that she went back to heck where she came from, or became unemployed. Insane fraud and terrible neighbors today. Our first story is called, "Was Bored at Work, so Got a Guy Fired and Possibly Sent to Prison for Fraud," posted by Bored Hotel Worker. I work the night shift as a receptionist at a hotel in Norway, and most nights are spent watching Netflix and playing games. Last summer was really slow, and I also worked a lot extra, so I ran out of stuff to watch and of games to play. One night, I got a mail from Scooter. He wanted to book a room for almost 20 days. I just had to send him the price and the confirmation that we had the rooms available, and then he would send me his credit card info for me to pre-charge. Normally, we just delete these kinds of mail, but I was bored out of my mind, so I responded with an offer for around $2,000 for the entire stay. I also made sure to inform him that he could cancel for free up to the day of the arrival. This is probably the most common fraud attempt in hotels and travel industry. Unlike most businesses, we are able to charge credit and debit cards with only the card number and expiration date. No need for a PIN code, a CVC, or other authorization methods. Our software also allows us to deposit money directly to local and international bank accounts by using the card number. Because of this, jerks like Scooter will try to prepay with stolen and skimmed cards, but then cancel the booking and ask us to refund the amount to a different card. A couple hours after sending him the offer, he responded with a Visa number and told me to charge him as soon as possible. I checked the card with our validation software, and to my big surprise, it did not belong to Scooter. If validation succeeds, it will return with the card owner's name 90% of the time. I sent him a new mail stating that the card was declined because of insufficient funds. He quickly replied and gave me a new card to try. Guess what? This one didn't belong to Scooter either. Wasn't even the same person as the first card. By checking the BIN codes, the 6 first digits, I found which banks had issued the cards. Not even issued in the same country. My plan was just to call the banks and inform them of the attempted scam, but there were still several hours before I could go home, so I decided to screw with Scooter a bit more. I sent him a reply that the second card went through and also the reference number for his stay at our hotel. As expected, a couple hours later, Scooter sent a mail canceling the order and asked if we could refund the money to a different card, as he had lost his wallet and deactivated the card that he paid with. This card was issued from a Polish bank. Not sure why, but Polish bank accounts are often used by people who want to launder money from Bitcoin and drugs. You can buy a legit card for around $500 that is registered to some guy or girl in Poland from the darknet. At this point, Scooter was probably pretty happy about the $2K he would soon receive. I replied that it was no problem for me to transfer the dollars to a different card as long as it was valid. How fun it would be to also cancel his own card so that he had to spend $500 for a new one. Not fun enough. In the last mail, I wrote that he could send me the card number, but that our email server would go down for maintenance in a few minutes, so my boss would do it on Monday. It was now Saturday morning, so enough time for the charged bank to call us and reverse the transfer. If he needed the money right away, I told him to call the hotel before I ended my shift at 7 o'clock. He called almost immediately, and I wrote down the card number and his phone number. Told him that I transferred the money and that it would be in his account by 12 o'clock. My shift ended, and I went home with all the info that Scooter had provided. Wanted to see if I could find out who he was, and of course, this idiot had an open Facebook profile that I found using his phone number. He even listed his address and employer. Looked a bit like the artist Scooter, but even with more screwed up face and spiky hair full of gel. He lives somewhere outside of London in an area that I would describe as a British trailer park. Houses that were nice at some point, but where the owners had spent no money on maintenance since it was built. Trash everywhere and broken windows that were boarded up or fixed by sealing holes with garbage. Now to the fun part. According to his Facebook profile, Scooter worked at a hotel. This meant that he would have access to card information from guests that booked through sites like Booking.com. I called the manager of the hotel and I told him there was reason to believe that one of his employees was trying to commit credit card fraud and that the card's numbers could belong to their guest. I gave him the name of the people who owned the cards that Scooter tried to pay with, and to no surprise, both had stayed at the hotel. I told him it was Scooter, and the manager just exploded in anger. Not 100% sure what he said because he was screaming so loud, but I think Scooter wasn't a normal employee. He worked there through some kind of government training program or something. After talking to the manager, I called both Visa and MasterCard International and told them about Scooter's little business venture. Apparently, it's pretty easy to check if there are more cards that have been involved in fraud, where the cards also have been used at Hotel Scooter. With his Polish deposit account info, they would also be able to pin it on Scooter if he had been successful in scamming anyone and then sue him for the amount stolen. The police also called me later to get a statement regarding the whole situation, so I know that the manager reported it to the police. Not sure what happened to Scooter, but according to his Facebook profile, he no longer works at the hotel or anywhere else as far as I can see. Psycho Karen neighbor destroys property and files a false police report with an update. Click the video on your screen to find out what happens to Karen, and I'll see you there.